So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deacon Rory Traynor. Now I have to say Deacon. I was ordained yesterday to the transitional diaconate. God willing, in 1 year I'll be ordained a priest. But I'm a member of this parish. I grew up in this parish, so it's so wonderful to be home. And it's so good to see so many faces I know, so good to see so many faces I don't know, and who I'm looking forward to meeting. But Father Gary has graciously allowed me to do my first homily here, and he assured me that he will point out any and all heresy. So it's a thing. It's fine. Christ tells us today, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. But are we really able to do this? In New England today, we have just so many Catholics, and yet our churches are almost empty. How can we go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, if they're already Christians? The message seems to have already arrived, so now what are we supposed to do? Does Jesus' command still bear on us today? I mean, how many of us grew up in Catholic households, and how many of us have family that no longer practice the faith? I would wager that most, if not all of us, do. I would say that half of the people I see in New Hampshire, probably more than half, were Catholic at some point in their life. I think we struggle. We look at commands like this and we think, how am I supposed to bring my daughter back to church? How am I supposed to bring my spouse back to Mass? And just forget about how I'm supposed to change the world and bring them back to God. What Jesus doesn't seem to understand is that all of these people have already been baptized, and yet they just don't care. Is this the message we need to be preaching? Maybe we need to upgrade it. Maybe our culture had it right, that tolerance, really indifference, is the important virtue. Should we, in other words, preach the gospel of live and let live instead of the command of Jesus to go and baptize? What does he actually want us to do? Well, I might be in the minority, but I know, this message still applies to us. And maybe the key to unlocking this problem is not so far away, and in fact is hidden in the gospel and in the feast we celebrate today. Today, as you all know, is Trinity Sunday, and for most of us, considered to be the most boring feast in the entire calendar year. I mean, think about it. It's God's Sunday. It's like what am I supposed to do with that? Pentecost is like, oh, the church is born. Eucharist, that's great. But Trinity, it's just a thing. It's okay. But the seemingly boring feast is actually the very heart of our faith. And I would say it's the thing that makes us different from every other religion in the world. And I'll explain how. Now, many of you heard this before, and most of you know what the Trinity is, but quick refresher, quick 101. From all of eternity, the Father is pouring himself out in love to the Son, and from all of eternity, the Son pours himself out in love to the Father, and that exchange between them is so real, it becomes a third person, the Holy Spirit. Now, we all accept that God created the world, at least I hope you do, and whether he did it by a big bang or in a garden, doesn't make a difference. He still created the world. We accept this. So what does this mean? This means that before anything else in the world existed, God existed. God was. And before anything else, before the sun, the stars, the earth, the plants, the frogs, people, government, before all that, God is the one who existed. And what is God? He is Trinity. He is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He is a relationship of love. So before anything else in the world existed, there was a relationship of love. The very thing that caused all things to be created, you, me, and everything else, the thing that caused all that to come into existence was a relationship of persons who love each other. That is the heart of all that exists. We're not some religion where we say that the most central thing that exists is a lawgiver. We say that the most central thing that exists, the most important thing, is a relationship of persons who love each other. If we are made in the image of God, then we are made in the image of the Trinity. When Adam met Eve in the garden, he exclaimed, "This at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." Adam and Eve, men and women, were made for communion with one another. It's part of being in the image of God. And their love is blessed by a third thing that's created. It's children, for those of you who aren't connecting the dots. Okay, so it's mom, dad, kids. Okay, good. Some of you were looking at me, you're like, it's not high theology people, okay? But it sounds like the Trinity, right? It's a relationship. There's love. There's exchange between you and your spouse creates this third person that you eventually will send out into the world and say, take the values that we've taught you and teach them to the world. Teach the love that I've taught you and bring that to the world, to your families, and show them what true life is. This is what God the Father and the Son do. They send out the Holy Spirit to us, and they did that at Pentecost. You see, what Jesus tells us in today's gospel is an extension of the life of the Trinity into us. Each of us are baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Thus, what is part of our nature, relationship and love, what's naturally a part of us, is now consecrated to be this higher thing. All of humanity, this mission to go out, we're called to then call everyone to that same relationship of love, that same relationship that's lived in the Trinity. How does any of this help us make disciples of all nations? It gives us a place to start. In fact, I would say it shows us the mission itself. The Trinity shows us not only who we are and how we were created, but also how we are to relate to the world. We are made for loving relationships. We are made in the image of God. When we are made in the image of the Trinity, we are made to go out and teach people this same thing. We were baptized into a faith that tells us to send and sends us out to do the same thing that our God is. How do we live out this commandment? Are you married? Evangelize your spouse by being the one who forgives. Be the one who reminds them that they ought to go to Mass and confession, not because some boogeyman in the sky said so, but so they can fully discover who they are. Is a sibling or a coworker a fallen away Catholic? Be the person who does not gossip at the water cooler. Be the person in your family who does not gripe against one another. Be the first person in your family to forgive, to be patient, to be kind. Exceed everybody in kindness. A friend or an enemy far away from the faith, choose to be in relationship with them, especially if it's an enemy. Choose to be in relationship with them. What kind of relationship? The most loving one possible. The one that never demands, the one that always gives and never ceases to give of yourself. More to the point, build a household of love in your homes, in your families. By doing this, you will show your children and your spouse what it means to love. Apologize for mistakes, forgive those who have wronged you. By living this out every day, in every moment, you will show your children and eventually the world what real love is. It's not tolerance. It's not indifference. It's loving relationship. In short, if you want to convert the world, start by loving the person in your living room. This is the image of the Trinity. To give to each other selflessly in small and great ways. By loving those who are in relationship with us, we become models of the Trinity. In other words, we live out what is at the very heart of who we are as human beings and what we were made to be as Christians. A people in loving relationship with each other and God. Indeed, a real image of the Trinity, not by analogy, but in reality. So how are we to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit? We make disciples of those who have fallen away by invitation, by inviting them to the feast of heaven and earth here at the altar. We rebaptize the baptized by bringing them into loving relationship with the church, and we do this by showing them love. We love others because that is what we were made to do. And we bring them to the church because we want to show them the source of love, the Trinity, the life into which they had forgotten that they were baptized. So love one another. Allow yourself to be inconvenienced for the sake of others, and baptize the nations in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.